Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Susan Pincus and I'm the National Careers Professional with the College of Law. And I'm very excited to be here this afternoon with my three guest speakers. And we're going to talk about the topic of how to craft a value proposition with authenticity. And what we'll be looking at today is what actually is a value proposition, or an elevator pitch, or even a barbecue pitch. So it has many names and they're all interchangeable. We'll also look at why we actually need one, what are components of a pitch, how to find your point of difference, and the challenges and what can get in the way. And we're very lucky to have three guest speakers with us today, and they will all be giving their expert advice and insights on this topic. So I would like to just introduce you to each of them and to welcome them here today. So Anne-Marie Cade. Anne-Marie, do you want to, yes, your name's there so everyone will know who you are. Anne-Marie's a lawyer, a family dispute resolution practitioner, a nationally accredited mediator, a certified divorce coach, parenting coordinator, and founder of her own business, Divorce Right. She's also a lecturer at the College of Law and has recently been re-elected as councillor for the City of Glen Eira. She's a recent recipient of the prestigious Churchill Fellow, an internationally recognised award, and she will be using this to research best practice in parenting coordination. So welcome, Anne-Marie.
Hi, everybody.
Nicole Davidson. So welcome, Nicole. Nicole has extensive legal and commercial experience gained in Australia, the Middle East, and also the UK. She is a negotiation specialist and commercial mediator in her own business, Growing Beyond, and also a lecturer at the College of Law. Along her career journey, Nicole has practiced at top-tier law and accounting firms, as well as global investment banks. She also sat in the human resources function and has been involved in both graduate and seasonal clerk recruitment. Casey Tilak Ramesh, our third panelist, is a passionate advocate for youth, multiculturalism and diverse representation. She's an experienced director, legal advisor with Portable Long Service Authority and the Multicultural Youth Commissioner of Victoria. She has also served on a number of boards and committees and was instrumental in forming the first Youth Council in 2019 when working at the inaugural City of Greater Bendigo as the Youth Mayor. Casey has been named in the top 100 Future Leaders of Australia, Young Citizen of the Year 2017, Premier's Volunteer Leadership Champion in 2019, LIV's Law Student of the Year in 2019, and has represented Australia at the Young Humanitarian United Nations Conference in Thailand in 2018. Welcome, Casey. So just before I hand you over to each of our panelists, just to let you know a little bit about the housekeeping side of things. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask a number of questions of each of the panelists. And if you have any questions, if you wouldn't mind just putting those into the Q&A section as opposed to the chat, that just makes it very easier for me to coordinate. And we'll leave about 15 minutes at the end of the session to answer all your questions. And if we run out of time, got your email address and we can get back to you with the answers to your questions. And also just to let you know that this recording will be sent to you by email, so you should receive that within the next week. So over to you. Let's start with Nicole. So my first question, Nicole, is actually, what is a value proposition or an elevator pitch? And how do you put one together?
Thanks, Susan. Look, I think, different people will have a different perception about this a little bit, but really when we're talking about value proposition, it's about how you can describe to a possible employer how you will benefit them. Why will they take you on? How are you going to help them run their business, generate revenue, generally add value into the business? So it's about looking at, what are your skills? What are your interests? And how are you going to actually contribute to this team?
Okay, so it's almost like presenting them with some type of a solution, is that right? Like a possible solution to a problem or to a situation they might be having.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's probably partly it's about what you know, but it's more about what you can do. And how are you able to show them and demonstrate to them through what you're able to present, that not only do you understand the law that you've learned at university, but you've got some sort of commercial awareness and you can actually put that into practice in a really meaningful way for their clients.
And in terms of like if you don't really know exactly where your target audience is, because usually your pitch has to be targeted,
yep.
What would you suggest and recommend in that situation?
So I think really digging down to understand what are the actual skills that are being required. So, whether you're going into a family law firm or a criminal law firm or a commercial firm, a lot of the skills that they're going to need at a junior level are going to be quite similar. You're going to have good communication skills within the team. You're going to have good written communication. You're going to need to understand how to do legal research and be able to pick things up quickly. So while you might tailor your pitch or your elevator statement depending on the kind of firm that you're targeting, the skills that you're going to be presenting to each of them will be the same. So, and I think that's where having a pitch tailored and understanding who is it that I'm applying to, who is it that I'm trying to impress, and making sure that you've really taken the skills that you have and gone, how will I use them in this particular context? That to me is the real key, is that tailoring piece.
So tell us, just in terms of like your career as well, and the fact that I believe that you were thinking at one stage that you wanted to go down the accounting path. How has your value proposition kind of changed, and how have you adapted it over the years, considering that you have changed your career path along the way?
Yeah, thanks. It's really interesting. So I used to describe my career path as flaky, because I think by the time I had been working for, I think I'd been working for 20 years and I'd had 17 permanent roles, which is pretty, I don't know if that's impressive or not, but I think when it comes down to the value proposition, and interestingly, when I very much started, so I did a law commerce degree. I actually only did law because I got the marks. I was never really passionate about being a lawyer. And I learned a really important lesson, even at that stage of applying for graduate roles. I applied to what was then the big 6 accounting firms. And I applied to about 13 or 14 law firms at the same time. And they were all sort of top tier, big national firms. I can tell you I got 6 interviews and 5 job offers from the accounting firms, and I didn't get one single interview from a law firm.
Amazing.
Now, my law marks weren't as good as my commerce marks, but it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that I didn't actually sell myself in the letter. I didn't put the effort and the time into that letter that I did to 6 very tailored, crafted application letters for accounting firms.
And was that due to lack of time, or?
I think deep down it was lack of interest. I think I really didn't want it. And so, what I got back was all these letters saying things like, thank you for your undated letter. So I hadn't even put dates on. Now, this was back before the days of really good word processing, and I was doing it on an electronic typewriter. How old am I? So I make excuses, but I think really actually taking the time to craft each letter for its recipient is really important. And you know, I think as I've gone along, I've reproduced myself each time or recreated myself. So I've gone from accountant to lawyer to investment banker. And each time I've looked at what is it that I've developed and learned in the job that I've been doing, or the many jobs that I've been doing, that actually brings something to the table that is different to what my counterparts will have. So for example, when I got into Minter Ellison to do my articles, I'd missed out on all of the graduate roles, but I wanted to come in and do articles. And what I was able to sell was, I've been working in an accounting firm. I understand the finances. If you put me in the corporate team, I'm going to have a head start over other people who don't have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was brought into a role where I got to work purely in the corporate team. I didn't go through all the traditional rotations that I might have done elsewhere, but it was very much based around having had some experience that differentiated me from the general crew, and a bit of luck. I'll be honest, they just happened to have under-recruited and they were a bit short, so I was lucky at the time as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's probably a mixture, but I think also luck does come into it, but often it's more around...
you make your own luck a little bit.
You do. It's definitely around networking and leveraging off opportunities.
Absolutely.
And we'll be talking about that very soon, and Casey will be giving us a lot of feedback. So Nicole, just in terms of your experience when you were involved in the recruitment process, can you tell us a little bit about what made an individual stand out when you were doing that?
Yeah, great. And look, once again, I think there's two steps to that question. The first is actually getting your resume to stand out, because of course, you know, the first thing that people see about you is not yourself. You might be one of the most impressive people that comes across the desk, but all they're getting in that first stage is the resume. Now, I can tell you, when I last did graduate recruitment, we were getting about 700 applications for seasonal clerkships, probably slightly less than that for graduate roles. And we were at the time taking about 20 people. So the first thing is, we got pretty quick at going through those applications. You do your very best to go through each application in detail, but you're also under time pressures. So there were things that immediately would knock someone out. You know, whether it was typographical errors in the letters, which shows maybe a lack of attention to detail, whether it was, you know, sometimes it would be really, really poor marks, but often the marks weren't the first thing that you looked at. You're looking for, you know, typically we were looking for people who've had some kind of extracurricular activities. You know, what kind of jobs have you done to demonstrate that you're someone that's keen on learning, keen on taking opportunities? So that was a really big thing, and probably bigger than getting awards at uni or anything. You know, it depends on the firm once again. But if you can show them that you're a well-rounded individual, that you've done things that require good communication skills, they're really powerful at getting you through the first door.
Okay, so I think at what you were involved in outside of uni.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, once you get to the interview at the next stage, the real differentiator is those people that can really connect with their interviewers. You know, if you can have an authentic, open conversation where you're being you, I think what we sometimes see is people put on a mask and they're just a little bit, and because of nerves as well, they might be just a little bit pretending to be something that they're not, or just not letting their real personality shine through. So I think, you know, the more you can relax in an interview and just be you and be confident in who you are.
Absolutely.
And show that you've done the research, obviously.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So tell us about like the importance of resilience and growth mindset, particularly at the moment where it's a really, really tough and very competitive market. And, you know, and it's circumstantial as well. What's your advice, I suppose? And maybe that's one question. And then the other question is around, what are some of the things do you think that can kind of get in the way of you presenting yourself in the best light?
So if I deal with the first question around the resilience piece, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a very tough market at the moment. There are lots and lots of grads coming out. The market, you know, there's still roles around, but they can be a bit more challenging. So I think, you know, you need to go into it expecting that there will be knockbacks. And one of the biggest things, and something that's actually quite impressive, is if somebody comes back after they've been turned down for a role and actually asks for a bit of feedback.
Okay.
You know, really, once again, taking that opportunity to come back and say, look, I really appreciate having had the opportunity to talk to you. I'd love some feedback about what I might do differently to present myself. You know, what were some of the things? And I think that's a really powerful tool to build the relationship, because, you know, sometimes they don't have a role now, or the right role is, you're not the right person for the role at this point, but you've still got a chance to make an impression for the future.
So reach out and ask for feedback. And I mean, sometimes you might not always get it, but at least it's worth asking the question. And
Exactly.
I like the way you're framing it around development, your own development as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, showing that appreciation at the same time of their time invested in meeting with you as well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think preparing yourself in advance in terms of the resilience piece, you know, preparing yourself in advance that it might take a few steps before you get to something. But if you can learn a little bit from each one of those steps, you know, and take the time. I often say it doesn't matter whether it's going to a job interview or, you know, I teach negotiation, so it's the same thing. I say after each process, stop and just take a little bit of time to reflect. Don't beat yourself up about it, but actually say, okay, what did I do in there? What am I really happy with? Let's do that again. But also, are there some things that, oh, maybe I could have done a different answer, or I could have done something differently? And once again, it's not about going and beating yourself up for not doing it perfectly, but it's about taking on that learning and growing for the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is a bit of a tendency to beat ourselves up and always blame ourselves. But yeah, if you can just turn it around, I like that.
Yeah, I know I still have to do that sometimes after a mediation that hasn't gone well. I still have to turn off the beat yourself up tap and, you know, turn on the, okay, let's just look at this about what can we do differently.
Yeah, it's exactly. Hard. No, that's great. So in terms of like the last question, Nicole, in terms of what can get in the way, what would you say kind of gets in the way of how you might present yourself in the best light?
Yeah, look, I think for me, it's one of those things about where you're trying too hard.
Okay.
And that comes with that authenticity piece, I think. You know, and I remember, so my husband's a partner of a law firm. I shouldn't say who, but there's, you know, I'll let people do their research if they want. And he's just gone through seasonal clerk recruitments. And it was interesting because without naming who he'd been interviewing, he talked about one particular person. He said they just were trying. They just seemed like they were making too much effort and it didn't feel real. And I think that's that piece about being authentic. You know, he said they sounded like they were talking to try and impress us. Yeah. Which is hard. That's hard feedback because of course you're trying to impress the people because it's an interview, but it's got to be coming across as natural and authentic rather than using big words that you might not normally use or things that might be seen as impressive.
Yeah. Do you think it's okay? So I'm probably getting off the track, but just a question. Do you think it's okay then to talk about maybe where things didn't go to plan? If you frame it, you know, obviously you're having to be very strategic around that answer, but where things didn't go perfectly, do you think that's part of being real?
I think it absolutely is because it's about how you respond to that situation. You know, for me, things mucking up is part of life.
Okay.
And I would expect somebody who said nothing's ever gone wrong, I think they were lying.
Okay.
But I think it's about going, okay, yep, this went pear-shaped, but this is how I responded. This is what I've learned from it. And people can see, well, did you make a sensible choice at the time about how to respond to this challenge? But also, you know, have you actually not repeated that? Now, of course, if you have repeated it, you're unlikely to tell them anyway. But I think, you know, and this is where the thing, I know with interview practice, people are often told to think about a time when things went wrong and how you dealt with it. And it's, you know, that technique of taking a weakness and showing it as a strength. And I think that's fine, but it's, once again, it's got to be, you know, I think one of the ones that comes up that I've heard people talk about the most that like, oh, please don't do that, is where you go, oh, what's your biggest weakness? And you go, I'm a perfectionist.
Okay.
Which for a lot of people, we are perfectionists.
Yes, it goes
so it's
with
a
the
perfectionist,
profession,
and that's that kind of two-edged sword.
Yeah.
So, you know, with the weaknesses, I think really think about them and go, well, where has something actually gone wrong? And once again, the more you can provide an illustration of that and actually tell a story about it, the more engagement you'll get with the people interviewing you.
Yeah, I like that. I like that storytelling concept too. That's really powerful. All right. Well, thanks, Nicole, for that. We're going to move on to you now, Casey. So just tell us a little bit about what you've done and how you've gone about building up your brand and your pitch, and also, you know, how you went about leveraging all those opportunities. I mean, you obviously were a very, very busy person out there doing everything that is important to do, but, you know, you must be exhausted.
At times, definitely. Well, yeah, thanks for having me here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on here in Bendigo, which is the Dja Dja Wurrung and Taungurung peoples. My approach to building a brand was very ad hoc, if I'm honest. I didn't really set out to do law, much similar to Nicole. I sort of found myself in it because of grades, but also because I wanted to stay home in Bendigo. So when it came to looking for different opportunities, I started with the textbook answer that I think most law students start with, which is looking for things that have legal in the title and looking for things that have law in the title. So I looked for clerkships, I looked for scholarships, I looked for all these sorts of things. But my journey didn't really start until I started looking for non-legal opportunities. So living regionally here in Bendigo, we didn't really have as much access to standard legal opportunity, such as mooting competitions and clerkships and workshops. But we did have, semi-legal stuff. We did have, internships at different firms around here. And we also had our local legal centre who was taking on volunteers at the time. So that was something that I started with from first year, I believe. I think it was second semester, which was quite interesting and fun. So then I leveraged that experience and went, again, the textbook law student way, and applied to a local commercial law firm where I worked in conveyancing for about a year or so without really thinking about it, but later deciding that it wasn't for me. And then from there, I felt a bit lost because I feel like I followed the traditional path. I'd done what everyone said, I got the grades I wanted, I got this, and this, and I still wasn't happy at this role. So I decided to think a bit more broad. So I stepped up onto community boards because when I thought about what I really wanted to do and what I enjoyed that I was doing in the moment, it was volunteering and being on the ground in the community, seeing change. Whereas when I was in conveyancing, a property settlement, you'd never see them again. And that wasn't very fulfilling for me. So I looked at the community boards I could step onto, rather using my legal degree as a skill set and a toolkit rather than a qualification to get somewhere. And that's led me to some really fun places. So, sitting on Ambulance Victoria's committee, Victorian Electoral Commission, looking at, health, governance, economics, leadership, food relief and airports. So all different sort of things that I'd never sort of dabbled in before. But I think it's really...
Sorry, that's just so fascinating. How do you do that? How does one do that at your early stages in your career? Like, how does one kind of pick up those positions? You must be so convincing.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think, and I'll go into it a bit later about, this whole authenticity that Nicole was talking about, which is, very much so, how do you find out what you want to do, but then be really about how you want to do it and how you provide value. But board for me was something that sort of came easily because they needed people who weren't scared of really big pieces of legislation. They weren't scared of funding guidelines and governance and all of these rules that come up. But there's also a really huge gap of young people in that who are willing to do those. So we're sort of looking at this opportunity of, I always talk about this concept called Ikigai, which is a bit of life coaching of, what do I do well that people want, where there's a need that I could get paid for, and you sort of like marry it up in this little Venn diagram. So that was one of those things for me with governance. But, it sort of came full circle once I stepped onto the board of the legal centre that I volunteered with. So I volunteered for 5 years at the centre, and now I sit on the board as one of their non-exec directors. So that sort of led to being our youth commissioner, which I love heaps. But I think in, if I was to give advice on building that brand and really pitching yourself, it would be about just please try not to fall into the trap of only looking for legal opportunities. A long time in a lot of instances. So while you have stuff like mooting, that's super important. What I would argue is more important is advocating for community funding on a board. So how can you use the skills that you've gotten and how can you really exercise them and refine them in different contexts? And what Nicole spoke about earlier of, you know, really creating those opportunities, but also think about what you like to do without any motive. So, you know, on a Sunday, what do? Do you play sport? Well, maybe you can get involved in your sports club a bit more and, you know, join a board, or maybe you could, you know, help them do something strategically. What do you do without thinking? And also your personality too. So I think what a lot of students miss is that who you are without trying is to authenticity, but also career direction. So, you know, if you're someone like me who obviously loves talking, you know, advocacy and public speaking might be your deal. But if you're someone who's more introspective, then maybe something more analytical and really detail oriented is more your thing. And if you can market yourself in that way, you're showing employers that you're not only self-aware of what you bring to the table, but you actually have some value to provide to them.
Okay, that's amazing. And interesting that you talked about starting out and doing a bit of exploration and working in areas that also informed you that they weren't for you. So I like that idea. And no, I think that's really great advice. Thank you for that. So in terms of, like, I think, you know, we were talking before about the market being incredibly competitive and tight, and the fact that you speak to one PLT student or alumni or even undergraduate, and they're all just so impressive, and the benchmark and the bar is just getting so ridiculously high. How do you actually stand out?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and something that I think is on the minds of all law students at the moment, because there's so many of us. That's the issue. It's not going to be easy, but I think the really important thing to remember that's really easy to forget is that everyone is already different by nature of all of the experiences you've had so far. And it's about building on that and differentiating them, which boils down to two components in my mind when you're looking at this strategically. So number one is, do I have what I need to succeed? And number two is, how do I make sure that other people know that I have what I need to succeed? Right. So in that one, I look at, you know, what do I need to succeed in a role? And I work backwards. So that's looking up, like, I'll look up position descriptions for a position that I want in 3 years. So something really outlandish. And then I'll work backwards from there. So the first thing I'll do is use it as a bucket list. So I'll tick off all the skills that I think I have at the moment. And then I'll look at the skills I don't. And I look at reframing. So, you know, while they want 5 years of management experience, what do I have right now that counts as management-y? I can sort of build on and really refine, because it could be that, you know, in my next performance development cycle at work, I say, I want to learn more about management. And I sort of strategically take it that way. And then if you don't have the skill, you look strategically, but also laterally to see if there's any opportunities to refine or gain it. But I think there's such an untapped potential in the skills and the experiences that people already have that they're not marketing correctly. So that brings me to that second part of, you know, how do you communicate to others that you have what it takes? And I think it's about being really strategic in your application approach. So Nicole spoke about earlier that scattergun approach and how it doesn't really work sometimes. But what did work for me was having a master document of roles and scenarios that I'd been through where I tailored each skill to particular things. So, you know, I was the manager of Australian Geographic at one point in retail. So I looked at, you know, that comes under customer service, conflict resolution with those, you know, not so nice customers, under organization, cash handling, all those sorts of things, but also, you know, adapting and reframing your skills and experience to show the value. And this is where there's that, you know, mindset change of, you know, every experience you've had can be framed and then reframed again and reframed to become something more useful to you at the time. So there's a very big difference between saying, I worked at Macca's for 3 years versus I've refined my customer service, teamwork, and communication skills over a 3-year period in a dynamic and fast-paced environment. Same experience. You know, same thing. But I think we really undersell ourselves, you know, and whether that's out of modesty or, you know, assuming that everyone knows what our job is. Like, I think the best piece of advice that I've gotten is to explain my role as if it's never existed before in terms of what you love. But I think the most important thing in doing that is being really comfortable and confident about what you can provide to an employer and communicating why they should invest in you rather than having the mindset, which I had at the very beginning in that first law firm where I said, I'm just willing to do whatever you give me. You know, I'm anything you have. But now I'll say, you know, I've built up this far. I'm really keen to refine these parts of myself. And I think your firm's the perfect place to go for it. So, how can we help each other out in that way?
Okay, that's amazing advice. I mean, in terms of like kind of the whole concept of the pitch, if could you kind of just give us a very quick example of what you might say if you met someone for the first time?
Yeah, I think there's a whole thing of, I feel like a pitch has become a sort of an art in which way people make it quite formulaic, but
Yeah.
about it quite logically. It's what do you have that someone else wants? And how do one, convince them that they want it, two, convince them that I have it, and three, present it as a win-win sort of scenario, which brings in that sort of mediation, negotiation sort of mindset there. So I would say something along the lines of, so if I was going to a board, for example, I would, in an interview, I could say, I really value this board, and I think it's an incredible opportunity because you value young, diverse female representation, which provides an intersectional view on a number of issues.
Okay.
And if I say that to them, then later on when I'm talking about myself, I could say that I provide a particular lens, which is, young regional intersectional lenses, which can provide this, this, and this, and you communicate that value to them in terms of something they'll care about, which is, the solutions they create and are they sustainable? And then from there, it's very much so, how can you marry the two things, but say, I'm really keen to get experience in this field, and I think that I can provide you a lot, and work from there.
Okay, no, that's really, really good. And leaving them with something as well to think about. So is that another part of that? So, you need for them to remember you from a positive perspective.
Yeah.
So leaving them with an impression of something that you might say like that as well. And the call for action, I suppose, is important too.
I think a trick that I always used to use was thinking about the future of the organization beyond your graduate opportunity. So when someone would ask, do you have any questions? I used to, like, way back when, my answer used to be like, what are the next steps in the grad program? Something like that. But now it's, in the next 5 years, what do you think the 3 biggest challenges for your organization are going to be? And how do you think, career progression through your organization is going to really supplement that sustainability and that progression through change? Something like that. You're looking more so at, how can I be an asset to this business and stay term? Yes,
that's a really insightful question as well. A lot better than the stock standard ones. The questions for the sake of it. Okay, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. So just I think kind of honing in on your extreme expertise in the whole kind of the social media side of things. Where does self-awareness come into all of this? How important is self-awareness when you're putting your pitch together?
Thank you for having me, Susan. It's great to be part of this incredible
pleasure.
See, I think we have to first look at what is self-awareness, right? So self-awareness, I think I look at it from the perspective of my background and my mediation experience and, the conflict resolution space that I come from. And for me, it is really the ability to manage your own emotions, be able to be, to respond to a situation rather than be reactive, right? So I think it's really important to be in control, to, build your emotional intelligence, to me, that's what self-awareness is. And then, of course, when, talking of social media, sort of really build your image from a perspective of authenticity, and just make sure that you are pitching yourself as who you are, not try to be someone you're not. And I think that is something that's really, really important. And when we're talking social media, I think it's really important also to manage that yourself. Because a mistake I think a lot of people make from a social media perspective is maybe give it over to someone else to manage. And then, that is a problem, because where's the authenticity in that, So I think that's a really important perspective when you're talking of building that brand.
Okay, so I know, because we've run some LinkedIn sessions together, Anne-Marie, that you've always said about the importance of collaboration and using LinkedIn, for example, as a way of sharing rather than necessarily using it as a way to self-promote. So can you perhaps just share a little bit about what your ideas are there? Because it seems to me that looking at your profile, like you are always big into sharing.
Yes, so thank you for asking me that, because I think that is a big mistake we make with social media. And we have to look at LinkedIn as being that, that medium that really helps you build your brand, build your profile, and, build the connections. So how do you best build those professional connections? By actually, drawing not just on your own experiences and, showcasing that, but really trying to build collaborative networks, talking to other professionals. And what better network to do that than LinkedIn? And I find that, just possibly engaging with people who not just in Australia but worldwide, and they, people on LinkedIn are so they just want to share and reach out to them and possibly just share their information to start off with. And something else I think we've discussed before is, if you want to connect with someone, don't just, put the connect in there. Always send a message, personalize it, to ask them what it is that they do, how you can possibly, enhance their profile through what you're doing. I think that is something that's really, really important, and something that we fail to do a lot of the time. And if you do that, the sharing can really take you quite far. And that's how I think I've built a lot of connections through LinkedIn.
So in terms of like what type of personalized wording would you use to someone that you were wanting to perhaps reach out and have a conversation with? Like what kind of typically would be something that would be a good way of starting that conversation?
I think try not to be too professional and too formal. It's important to really be yourself. So how would you engage with a professional if you were meeting them face to face? Just be authentic, be simple in that. Tell them, look, I really love what you're doing. I'd love to engage with you. Would you like to connect? I mean, because nothing's more annoying than, getting a message on LinkedIn where someone's trying to sell you their services in the first engagement. But I find that, LinkedIn is actually becoming more sort of a humane kind of approach. And, even, be empathetic to the cause. If you feel that you're passionate about issues like, domestic violence, for instance, build on that and, share people's posts on that. Now, that's something that I do. Recently, there was a post on, a walk for domestic violence, so it's about just sharing that, joining it, starting a group yourself, so that people know that you're passionate about it and they know that you're genuine as well. I think that's really, really important.
That's good advice. Yeah, maybe sometimes we just overcomplicate things. I mean, I love that. Just, I love what you're doing. I mean, just something like that. Or, yeah, I really enjoyed listening to you speak today, and I loved some of the insights that you spoke about. Yeah.
And I think something else that's really good is also, using video to connect. And even video posts, I think, are very useful, because that's something, people sometimes get very tired of reading, reams of information. Everyone's all the time reading something. So, engage by posting videos. LinkedIn now has a feature like Instagram stories. Get on there and share information on, books you're reading or your perspectives on some particular work you're doing. And you'll get that traction by doing that, because it shows your human side there,
Okay, now that's really good. Just for participants, if you want to start putting your questions in, that would be fantastic under the Q&A in the meantime, and we'll be taking questions very shortly. So just in terms, Anne-Marie, when you were talking before about the elements of a pitch, like what do you think are the key elements of a pitch?
Now with a pitch, see, I've done a lot of work in the marketing space, and I think it's really important because as lawyers we don't get that perspective, right? But we're meant to go out there. In effect, we're really selling our skills, right? So especially when you're trying to canvas work, it's a difficult market out there. So how do you do that? So I think it's really important to create some clarity around who you are. So you're talking of your name, introduce yourself, name, fame, what's the, what is your background? You talk about your authority, and then you talk about the industry that you're in. Then something that's, I think, really important in a pitch is you must remember that you're really solving someone else's problem, right? So that is, I think, key. We might sometimes in a pitch get very lost in trying to sell ourselves and how good we are, but really the customer at the end of the day doesn't really care about who we are. They want to know whether we can solve their problem. So I think it's really important to keep that front and center, and then from there talk about the solution. Talk about the solution that you have to offer whoever it is that you're pitching to, and that will depend on whether you're pitching to an employer or you're pitching to you're trying to get on a board. You talk about that solution. And then talk about your passion. I think that's incredibly important. Really talk about your passion and what drives you, why you're doing what you're doing. I think people tend to be very diffident about that. And I love what you said, Keshi, about bringing all your experiences into play. I tell that to my students all the time, that, even if you worked at McDonald's, that is incredible experience, because lawyers were not so well known for our customer service, but if you have that customer service angle and experience, you're just got so much I think so much of an advantage. So talk about your passion, your why, and something else is we must make sure that when we're making a pitch, it's actually a sales call. So don't forget to make sure that you put those next steps in there as to what you can do, as it were, to close the deal, seal that deal. So whether it's a job interview or whether you're trying to get on a board, and don't be diffident about it. Just, be confident and get out there and, make sure that you clinch it.
So what would be an example for if you wanted to have a conversation with someone like yourself? So say I'm a student, and I want to have a chat with you because I'm really interested in the work that you do. So how would I put my pitch to you?
So are you talking of just any general area of law, or
the area that you're involved in?
Okay.
Yes.
See, I actually go very simple all the time. I think it's really important not to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, simple's good.
Yeah, and what I have done is, this is something I use, and whoever it is, I will just go out there and make the connection. I will introduce myself and I will tell them, look, I really admire what it is that you do. I would love to have the conversation with you. Would you have the time to have a coffee, or would you, have a call? And I have made incredible connections just by doing that. Reach out. Don't be nervous. Don't think that someone is, it seems like they have, all this incredible experience and they've, just unreachable. You would not believe how giving people can be. They really want to share that information. And this is something that has really worked for me. And I can never, tell you how useful it is. So make sure you do that. Reach out, talk to people, and don't be nervous about doing it.
Yeah, and you get better at it in time and with practice.
Of course you do. Of course you do. And, just people are so generous. They're so lovely. And don't think they're not going to talk to you because you're a law student. People do want to talk to you, and, and there's so many amazing mentors out there. Reach out, ask them what you want, and you'll get it.
Okay, but be specific in terms of what the next step is.
Yes.
Okay. Just in terms of questions, we have got a question here. So let me just pull that question up. Okay, so was there a defining moment that made you passionate about the legal pathway? So whoever wants to handle that question is welcome.
I'm happy to go with that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's an interesting question because actually, see, I ran a law firm for about 12 years, and I would hear all the time in the course of my work when I worked with family law clients how disgruntled they were with the process. And I started thinking, no, there has to be a better way. And that's what got me on the path to mediation. And, you know, just being so excited about being able to give your clients a better experience, a better alternative. And, you know, you will come up with so much opposition, because when I started doing this probably 6 or 7 years ago, people told me, are you crazy? Peaceful divorce, it's never ever going to happen. And I hear that to this date, but it has never stopped me pursuing my dream, as it were, of, you know, a peaceful, amicable divorce where children will be saved from, you know, the conflict, and just ensure that, you know, you are, it's that grit, the determination that you've got a dream and follow that dream, and don't let, you know, there are so many naysayers out there that, you know, you sometimes feel, and I have felt that way. Yeah, this is not going to work. But, you know, then you have one client who is so receptive and you create change and it drives you. So pursue, keep at it, because that's what makes the difference, I think.
If I could add to that, Susan, I think, you know, and I guess talking about those sort of pivotal moments that put you down a legal track, I'm probably not the best person to talk about that, given that I left the law before my practicing certificate was ever issued after I was admitted. But once again, it's really interesting. I think what you've got to do is look at the things that are options on the table. And, you know, for me, I think one of the things was I was never afraid to try something different. And, you know, I left the law. For me, I didn't actually love the law, because to me it was too technical. It was too focused around form rather than substance. And I found it really, really frustrating. It wasn't fair, it wasn't equal, and it was a lot of effort put in that wasn't necessarily delivering real outcomes for clients, whether it was front end, you know, contract drafting and all of that, or whether it was litigation, particularly if it was litigation. And so my journey has obviously been quite different in that I went from law to banking to insolvency to recruitment consulting for a while to learning and development. But it was interesting because I then fell into a role where I was teaching negotiation. And it was at that point that I went, I can go back into those problems that I thought were not being resolved well, and I can do it from a different lens. And so a bit like Anne-Marie, who does divorce, one of my specialties is business divorce. And it's the same. I don't see why parties should go through months and months and months of legal battles that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the Supreme Court or the county court, when they can come and have a collaborative conversation to bring it about. But what I do love about what I do is I'm still working within that legal context, and I love working with lawyers in that context. And once again, coming back to this idea of having to create a pitch, one of the biggest things I've had to do since I've recreated myself as a mediator is really hone that pitch, because for me, I'm going into a market, once again, it's a tough market to get into. Commercial mediators, well, to put it into context, I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a partner at a national law firm, and he said to me, Nicole, you clearly understand negotiation and mediation. You really sound like you know what you're talking about. But we're going to keep using the same mediators we've always used because we're conservative lawyers, and we'll just keep using them even if they're not very good. Oh. Now, I was like, oh my God, I was okay up until that last phrase. But for me, it's about pitching myself. So now I pitch myself and I go, I'm not a traditional lawyer. I don't come in here as your traditional commercial mediator. What I bring is a very solid understanding of the law, albeit I'm not an absolute expert and up to date in every element of the law, but what I bring is a real understanding of how businesses work. And so I can deliver you an outcome that takes into account how the law works, and I will understand all of the legal documents, but what I'm bringing you is commercial outcome focuses. Wow. And so it's that idea of going, what do the clients want? They want to know that they're going to get their dispute solved. Now, if I was going into a firm, I'd be going, what do they need? And trying to target my pitch to them.
Very good. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. There's a few more questions that have come in. So Another question is, how do you feel about students directly messaging people in the profession to connect? I'm interested in messaging a very experienced person with a similar background to me. I would genuinely love to hear about her experience, but feel unsure about reaching out. So we did touch on that. Anne-Marie, you touched on that. I don't know, maybe Casey, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, no worries. I used to do it all the time. I'm so guilty of it.
You're gutsy.
Well, I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome to it.
Yeah.
I took up this commissioner's role. I had people connecting with me and I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's get a coffee with something virtually. And they'd meet me and be like, you were willing to meet with me? And I was like, I'm not anyone special. What are you talking about? Underlying assumption that we aren't worth people's time, that we really do need to break through. And I think, you know, a lot of the time, anyone who's in, you know, a high up position has at some point in their life been not in that position or been somewhere lower or been a student. And I think, you know, a lot of people are quite generous, which is what Anne-Marie touched on earlier. So I think, you know, it's very much about complimenting first and saying exactly why you want to do this. So I'll send a message to someone and be like, hi, I see we're working in the same space. I've been following your work on LinkedIn for a while. And it really excites me. And it's an area that I'm looking to branch into or whatever it may be. And I'd really love the opportunity to connect. You know, please let me know. But I think the flip side to that is really keeping grounded that people are busy. So don't assume that it's because of you and that, you know, you weren't good enough for a response or whatever it may be, because it could have just gotten lost in a bunch of different stuff. But I think Anne-Marie also touched on this, you know, collaborative engagement sort of piece, which is, you know, if they don't respond to your message, that's fine. But the next time they make a post, comment on their post and be like, that's a really exciting initiative. Can't wait to blah, blah, blah. And every now and then you'll see someone's name come up and you don't realize why you've seen it so many times. And it's because they've continually engaged with you. So I think I would definitely say thumbs up to messaging people that you admire, because everyone has time.
Okay.
Can I just add to that? I agree with everything that Casey said there. And, you know, I get people contacting me from time to time. And I think that idea about respecting people's time is also really important. Don't take it personally. Coming back to resilience, if somebody accepts a connection but doesn't have the time or capacity to meet with you, just, you know, not everyone will have that ability. The only thing I'd add to what Casey said is if you are going to be what I call LinkedIn stalking them, and I do it, it's okay, just be careful that the comments that you put are actually value-adding comments, not just great thought. You know, it's like, what is it about it that makes it a great thought? Actually, in your response, show that you've thought about it, because otherwise you literally are just a LinkedIn stalker. You know, I agree with that because, or, oh, that's an interesting perspective. How about this? So actually make it a part of a conversation, not just I'm stalking you and I want you to see my name often. Because I think that's really, people will see through that.
It's a bit like a Facebook like. So not just doing the likes, but actually, writing a comment, which requires a bit of thought, which is a good thing. And probably that's why some people, you know, maybe aren't so keen to do it, but it's really critical. I
think something that's important and something we tend to forget is that the whole idea of social media is that we are meant to be social. So,
True.
You know, striking up a conversation. It's not just about liking posts or something, but really engaging. And that is where, you know, you really get value and being authentic in that engagement. And, you know, going back to, you know, taking that first step and trying to connect with someone, what's the worst thing that can happen? They can refuse or they cannot connect with you. That's fine. Just go ahead and do it. 9 times out of 10, you know, you get a response. So
yeah, I agree. For every person that says no, there'll always be someone that will say yes. Next question. Regarding trying something different, tips on rebranding, experience, or further education, or both? So I'm trying to understand that question. So
can I jump in? Because I think in terms of rebranding, I'm assuming that the person's talking about going from one thing and moving into another area, which is something I'm highly experienced in. And look, I think one of the things with changing direction, now whether it's changing from a particular practice area to a different practice area, or whether it's changing from a career into a different career altogether, I think the point is to think about a couple of things. One is, what have you done already that adds to the role that you want to get? So what are those skills and how do they transition across? But the other piece is about showing people that you're serious about it. This isn't just because you're a bit bored or something's gone wrong, but there's a legitimate reason why you're trying to move. So you want to do something that demonstrates that. So I'll give you an example from my own career, which was when I decided I'd been working at Ernst & Young for about 3 years in their insolvency practice, and I went on this training course and had this little epiphany that went, I want to work in learning and development. No experience, nothing, but I was suddenly applying for roles in learning and development. So what I did was I sort of took a view saying, okay, well, this is going to take a little bit of time, but what I started to do was I deliberately got more involved in the team trainings that we would do on a sort of weekly, fortnightly basis in the group. So I started taking on more responsibility to actually run that and manage the program. I went out and did some further studies externally. So I did an MBTI accreditation, and I started doing a grad dip in adult learning. Now, they were both fairly serious and fairly expensive steps at the time, but when I started going for interviews, I was able to say, this isn't just a whim, this is something I'm really, really keen about. So I would say, you know, if you're trying to do that rebranding exercise, if you're trying to move from one space to another, really think about what do you need to do to show them this isn't just a I want to, but I'm actually already taking action to make this happen in one way or another.
Good advice, yeah. And you know, how the best way to do that is. So like whether it was in your case where you did like even the MBTI training as opposed to going on and doing a master's, for example. So really working out the best way to fill those gaps.
I might just add in, I think I'm someone who's very much so sporadic. Like my parents will always say to me that I always want to do 10 different things that don't relate to each other, but I kind of need to believe that there's a reason I want to do them all. So I think there's a real strength in actually stopping and taking stock of why you want to do so many things and figuring out what is that little common thing between all of them that you can't just quite put your finger on. And for me, like I would bounce between so many roles, and I realized that it was problem solving. I just like attacking different problems and providing different lenses, and I solve it and then I leave or I'll get bored. So then for me, all of these roles of 6, 7 different roles of things that didn't relate to each other suddenly became a 5-year stint of wanting to solve problems. So I think there's a lot of strategy in figuring out what's the common component between your roles, if any, and trying to find out that that could be your passion and you just don't know what to call it yet. Take stock and have a look at those. But even when it's further education, like you could just have a love of learning. Like I'm on Coursera all the time doing random courses just because I get curious about stuff and I need something to occupy time. So it could be that if you are doing further education and you need to brand that, if you did a law degree and maybe a psych degree or whatever it was, you're just curious about how people can behave. And that's common to both degrees.
So it's kind of looking for themes and putting things together. Yeah, that's good.
I might quickly add to that as well, because I would, agree with everything you have said. And that's something I have done as well. Like my law degree led me to mediation, and that led me to conflict resolution, and then divorce coaching, and then well-being and happiness, and then, parenting coordination. So I would also say I'm a lifelong learner, but, make sure you do that because it's so important. These things are changing all the time, and, there are new skills out there, and, it's so useful because you didn't bring different perspectives to the work you do.
Just another question. How should you relate to managers who do not also have a degree or legal background and may feel threatened by a Bachelor of Law qualification?
Happy to speak to it for a little bit.
Yeah, sure. That would be good.
Yeah, while I was studying, I was working retail. So when you go for a retail job and you say you have a degree of law, they kind of look at you a bit weird. But I think the fun part of it is actually looking past what the qualification is and seeing why you did it and what it actually is if you took the name away. So if you take away the name of, Bachelor of Laws qualification, it is a series of subjects that teach you how to navigate, complex problems, but also how to speak to people, how to do this, how to do that. So if you can rebrand, and you know, you're going to get sick of me saying rebranding and reframing, but if you could rebrand that qualification to be something else and talk about the tools that come out of it, I think that's how you really level with people. Because say if you're talking to someone who's a manager in customer service, for example, they have all of the ground skills of you know, whatever it might be, like customer service, but you just have the advocacy tool that could be used to sell something as well. So I think it's about really finding that common ground, but also being mindful that, you know, education is power in a lot of places, and really managing that power imbalance if that's something you're concerned about. So maybe just being a bit more mindful of the way that you represent yourself in certain circumstances of your qualifications, but also, you know, there might be a bit of validation that's needed there too.
I think it also comes down to, why does this manager have the particular problem? You know, is it to do with you? Is it to do with some previous law grad that maybe came around big noting themselves because they kept repeating every 5 seconds, well, I've got a law degree. You know, is it you doing that? Is the law degree relevant at all? And you know, ultimately, I think, you know, it could be the person themselves have insecurities about their background. You just don't know. And I think, you know, coming in and always being respectful to people. And, you know, the fact is that we're very privileged to have law degrees. They have, you know, it's an amazing degree in terms of giving you opportunity to learn different ways of thinking and analysing and managing problems. But there's also a lot of people out there in the world who are amazing people who don't have law degrees. And you know, I think just coming in and going, you know, trying to figure out, if there is a particular person who's got an issue with this, trying to understand and try and figure out where that's come from. And until you've done that, like any good problem, until you know what's the cause of the problem, it's really difficult to go exactly what to do about it. But, you know, if you don't see it as a problem and you don't make a big deal out of the law degree, then maybe it's not such a problem anyway.
Good advice. We've just got one more question. So if there's any more questions, now is the time to put them into the Q&A box. This one's for you, Keishi. So how much of getting an internship role is cold outreach, e.g. cold email, LinkedIn messages, versus applying for advertised positions?
I think it really depends on the internship, but I like this term of cold outreach, because I do believe that there's warm outreach as well. So what I've seen for me a lot, and in a lot of the roles that I'm in now, they weren't actually advertised. It was that I caught up for coffee with somebody at some point and I spoke my truth of what I wanted to do at some point in my life. So I said to them, I'm really passionate about boards and I liked board stuff and I wanted to do governance and this and this. And while those conversations seemed quite aimless at the time, for one, it helped me sort of speak it into the universe, which one, clarified my pitch of what I wanted to do, but also made my intentions known to other people. But whenever that person saw an internship or a position or something, they would sort of flick it my way. And that was really handy for me. It's also very handy to apply for advertised positions, but finding out, you know, who your friends are in that space. So it could be that you don't know anyone who works at the company, but you might know someone in a similar position. So even just an outreach that way of, oh, you know, do you have any advice for me? Because the thing with LinkedIn and, you know, all of this sort of social media, much like what Anne-Marie touched on, was collaboration and making sure that these are warm connections. So not just friending them for the sake of friending them, but making sure that you're not knocking on their door only because you have a specific thing that you want them to do for you, but saying, oh, here's all of the value that I can do. If anyone wants it, you know, feel free, or like, I'd like to chat to you and figure out a bit more about the industry. So I think internships are tricky because there are the typical like grad connection sort of internships. That's where I found a lot of mine in the early days. But even if you just keep letting people know what you're looking for, people will refer that on to you. So
staying on people's radar as well, and then following up is really important. Yeah, not the quick flick. Yeah, people see through that. Just one last question. It may have been asked before, but how does an admitted solicitor get their first job without any post-admission experience? Who wants to answer that one? I suppose that's a very relevant question.
Yeah, look, I think coming back to that, I think once again, you're going to have to figure out what your market is, where are you trying to target, You know, where do you have an interest in terms of the areas of law? And I know it might be tempting to just say, I'll take any legal job. I don't care what area of law it is. But I think the more that you can actually focus on where your area of interest lies and target something that's a bit more specific, the better that you're going to be. The other thing is obviously, you know, try and get some experience through either paralegal work, and there are places where you can go and get casual paralegal work and things like, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, maybe someone like Law and Order or some of those organisations where they do work for others that might be discovery or putting things together. So if you can try and get some sort of related work experience, or of course, community legal centres are great places to get experience where you're actually getting there in live files, working with real clients. So, you know, to the extent that you've got the capacity to do that, and I know some people really are, you know, so busy with full-time study and trying to work enough to pay for that all. It's really easy to say, go and do work at a CLC or do some volunteer work, but to the extent that you can do that, it's a great way of actually getting some runs on the board. If you haven't got that ability, then once again, I think really look at what is the work experience that you've got and how are you going to really promote those skills that you're bringing to a law firm that they will value. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, and also add to that a lot of resilience and grit.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and patience. I think
Patience.
patience. You know, I've spoken to a few grads over recent times who have been going for a little while, and they might be 12 months or 18 months out from even from completing their PLT, and they're starting to lose heart. But once again, your law degree doesn't go away. You've still got those skills. You've still got the ability to keep up to date a little bit. And really looking at, well, if I can't get in directly from there, how do I move into something that's related? The other thing, of course, is there's more and more graduate roles at in-house law firms, you know, in-house roles. So there's opportunities outside the traditional law firm to go in and be a practicing lawyer.
I think I'll add in that, you know, I'm sure that during this waiting period, it's really tough. And I've seen my friends go through a lot of these periods where it just doesn't seem like there's anything out there. But the truth of it is that you have so much to offer, even if you don't know it. Like, as much as you can define yourself as someone who, you know, doesn't have post-admission experience just yet, you have all of the experience that comes before that. So there'll be so many community organizations, so many, you know, non-specific legal jobs in advocacy, in grants management, in, you know, governance, in all of these fields where you could be spending your waiting period and waiting time that's really going to help you later on. Because something that I've seen with my job is, you know, while I'm the legal advisor to Portable Long Service, my job last year was the legal and governance officer to Portable Long Service. I'm still not admitted. So I'm still in my final units of College of Law. So when it comes to, you know, the sort of jobs that you need to get and the ones that ask for post-admission experience, it might be worth asking for jobs that don't have it. So asking people if they've, you know, put out a particular job listing for a post-admission experienced lawyer, asking them, you know, what their ideas are for someone in your position, or seeing what community has to offer, but acknowledging that, you know, volunteering is fantastic, but you need to be in a particular, you know, capacity and a certain standing to give your time for free, which isn't always easy. But yeah, definitely try and think laterally about the opportunities in front of you.
Okay, well, I think we might use this now to end up. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you for your incredible advice and insights. And as one of the panelists has written, insightful and interesting discussion. Thank you all. So it's very, very generous of you all to give your time, particularly when you're all so busy. And I think there's some really, really amazing insights that people can take away. And yeah, get practicing with your pitches, but remember the importance of authenticity. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing everyone soon. Bye for now.